Chapter 3. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? Now I want for all of you to keep this in mind, how rest is mentioned at the very opening of chapter 3, because at the very end of chapter 3, rest is mentioned again. Is there not something to be found in that once the harvest was over, a rest through marriage is mentioned? Is it not like the end of our labors, where our rest is found with Christ, the church being figuratively called his bride? Also worthy of note is that by this point in the narrative, Ruth and Boaz have probably spent considerable time, at least around one another. David Guzik commented, so over the period of the harvest, Ruth and Boaz got to know each other pretty well. Not by dating each other like we do in our modern times, and it usually turns into some sinful lifestyle, but by seeing what kind of people the other was around a larger group. Now that's a very important note in that Naomi is about to try to hook them up, as we would say. But it's not as if they're just total strangers that have only met, a week before. No, they've been around one another for months now. And now is not Boaz of our kindred. Naomi speaking to Ruth about this rest or marriage. And now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maidens thou wast? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor.
So he pulls the threshing board around, and it separates the wheat from the chaff. And then, on a good windy day, then you take the winnowing fork, which is also mentioned in Scripture, and you throw it up in the air, and then, just like it says in Psalm chapter 1, the wind blows the chaff away, and the wheat that's heavy will fall down to the ground. You can gather it and start making your bread.
Wash thyself therefore, and anoint thee, and put thy raiment upon thee, and get thee down to the floor. But make not thyself known unto the man until he shall have done eating and drinking. Don't bother him until he's done with the day's labors. And it shall be, when he lieth down, that thou shalt mark the place where he shall lie, meaning observe it. And thou shalt go in, and uncover his feet, and lay thee down, and he will tell thee what thou shalt do. And more elaboration will be given right here in a moment. And she said unto her, All that thou sayest, Ruth speaking to Naomi, all that thou sayest unto me, I will do. And she went down into the floor, and did according to all that her mother-in-law bade her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn, meaning the grain, at the threshing floor. And the reason for them sleeping at the threshing floor was because back then lawlessness was pretty common. Remember, this was in the days of the judges, where every man did that which was right in his own eyes. So thievery was so common that people would often sleep at the very threshing floor where they separated the chaff from the grain and such. But anyways, Ruth, she observes Boaz going to sleep, and she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid her down. And it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid, and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, Who art thou? Remember, it's pretty dark. And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman.
And so in the middle of the night, he wakes up, and here's Ruth, and he's shook. And when people read that, it sounds like she is propositioning him sexually. No, it's worse than that. She's asking him to do his kinsman's part. Spread your skirt over me is the expression. You need to understand the culture. Hems were where the badge of authority resided. We think of authority as stripes on a sleeve or on a shoulder. In ancient Israel, it was on the border of your garment. When God speaks in Isaiah, God speaks of Israel, putting his skirt over Israel, putting his authority and protection over her. She asks him to put his skirt over her. People misunderstand that without the background. What she's asking him to do is marry her to raise up seed, because he's a kinsman.
Verse 10, and he said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich. And what he's meaning, it's firmly believed that by thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, is that at first everyone knew that she was very kind to Naomi. Now she is being kind to the family of Naomi, as well as in respect to the descendants. Verse 11, And now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou requirest, for all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. And now it is true that I am thy near kinsman. Howbeit, there is a kinsman nearer than I. Tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning, that if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman's part. But if he will not do the part of a kinsman to thee, then will I do the part of a kinsman to thee, as the Lord liveth. Lie down until the morning. And she lay at his feet until the morning. And she rose up before one could know another. And he said, Let it not be known that a woman came into the floor. Also he said, Bring the veil that thou hast upon thee, and hold it. And when she held it, he measured 6 measures of barley, and laid it on her, and she went into the city. And it's at this point that Matthew Henry noted, the conduct of Boaz calls for the highest praise. He attempted not to take advantage of Ruth. He did not disdain her as a poor, destitute stranger, nor suspect her of any ill intentions. He spoke honorably of her as a virtuous woman, made her a promise, and as soon as the morning arrived, sent her away with a present to her mother-in-law. A sensible man like Boaz knows that we must not only keep a good conscience, but keep a good name. We must avoid not only sin, but scandal. Verse 16, And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, How art thou, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done to her. And she said, These 6 measures of barley gave he me. For he said to me, Go not empty unto thy mother-in-law, until thou know how the matter will fall. For the man will not be in rest until he have finished the thing this day. The chapter begins with Naomi speaking of a rest for Ruth. Here we see the chapter closing with a possible reference to the 6 days in which the Lord worked and allowed for the 7th to be a rest. Let me go over the verses once again. In verse 17, we see the mention of 6 measures of barley. And in verse 18, the final verse, we see this rest mentioned. And it is believed by some of the commentators that Naomi would have understood about the 6 days that God worked and then rest on the 7th, to which bears repeating the 2nd clause of the final verse. For the man will not be in rest until he have finished the thing this day. Just like God was not at rest until the 6 days were complete.